All right, team. We'll start. Oh. 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 Hariom, and greetings from Niagara Falls. On Monday nights, I facilitate a space called Seeking Culture. And this week, the week of Thanksgiving, we have initiated a new facet of Seeking Culture called Satsanga Sidekicks. So different seekers will be placed together to be a sidekick to engage in satsanga. On Monday nights, I also facilitate a space called Parenting Culture. And in Parenting Culture this week, again, we are initiating a new facet of this space called accountability groups, where caregivers will be put together to be accountable for each other. And not this week, but starting next year, our Prithvi Seva Sangha, that's our environmental community, we are going to start to mentor different Chinmay Mission boards, different Mandir boards across North America to develop policies and practices that are more environmentally sound. I share this with all of you because the genesis of satsanga sidekicks or accountability groups or mentoring boards has really come from our mentorship sangha, has come from all of the participants, from our team. We all need support to be steady, which encourages sincerity, which encourages strength when it comes to seeking, when it comes to serving. It is very easy to be a participator, but to be someone who is strong when it comes to studying and serving, support is needed. And this is why we have our community. In September, our wellness workshop was on safety of society, specifically on thinking about what we can do in terms of gun violence. And just since that workshop, so much gun violence has happened in America, all over the world, but particularly in America. In this workshop, we had also talked about how next year we're going to invest our efforts towards trying to slow, I wish stop, but at least slow domestic violence. On Deepavali, our community completed raising over $125,000 in 3 years to slow down domestic violence in Canada, in America, in Bharat or India. In October, when we gathered, we focused on boundaries in relationships. There's lots of boundaries externally, but boundaries in relationships. When you have peace in your family, it becomes much easier to find the peace that comes with infinity. But if I'm lost in not finding peace with my family, it's going to be very hard for me to find peace through infinity. We're now in November, and I'll share a couple of reflective points before our seeker, our sharer, expands on this. I've been thinking a lot about the Industrial Revolution. Now you're asking why? I also don't know why, but I have been thinking about the Industrial Revolution and how at the time everyone was so happy with it. But in retrospect, it did bring some convenience, but maybe it brought more damage in the form of climate change. The Earth was doing all right before the Industrial Revolution. Similarly, I had read about the person who created the disposable water bottle, those plastic ones, the single-use ones, and the person who developed the K-cup, this disposable coffee pods. Both of them had deep regrets about what they created. And if you think about why, they created this to provide convenience. However, this convenience, when compared to long-term utility or destruction, has leaned more towards long-term destruction. Whenever we think of wellness, short-term wellness is not wellness. Wellness is always in the long term. And so one more reflection. In the many years that I've lived with and interacted with Puja Swami Tejomayananda, lots of people would come to him and share that I love to dance, I love to sing, I love to draw, etc. And usually it's a younger person who's come with their parents, and so their parents would immediately say, but how will you support yourself? Have you all experienced this? How will you support yourself? So, as someone who for almost 16 years has been trying to serve society and now humanity full time, how do I support myself? Mystically. Mystically is how I support myself. And if that's too weird for you, then magically. If that's too weird for you, then I'm trying to think of another word that starts with M, but I can't. The most impractical way to live is to live unhappily. So we can talk all day about how will you support yourself, but the most impractical way to live is to live unhappily. And a key to being happy, or a key to living practically, is seva, or service. We all know that intellectually. Now we'll get to learn about this experientially. Team.
Thank you so much, Vivekji. Thanks everyone for joining us tonight. I get to introduce our speaker today. So today we have Vidya Ramanathan with us, and she's a pediatrician in Ann Arbor, Michigan, and medical director of the University of Michigan Asylum Collaborative, which she's going to tell us more about. She was born into the Chinmay mission as her mother chanted for Pujya Gurudev, and during his lectures. If you've seen any recordings of Gurudev, especially when he does the Bhagavad Gita, Vidyaji's mother, Sharda Auntie, is the one chanting. So you may be familiar with her voice, even if you don't know her. And so she has been teaching in Balvihar since childhood. And inspired by Shama Didi, who leads Chinmay Organization for Rural Development ever since she was a little girl, Vidya was very inspired by her. And she's also inspired by Swami Swarupananda, and now she's working for Cord USA. So she's going to tell us all about her career journey and how she incorporates Seva into that. So with that, I'll hand it over to her.
Hello, Hariom. Oh, this is like such a joy to be here. I'm so surprised to see so many people here on Thanksgiving week. I thought, who's going to come to this Thanksgiving week? But you all are here. Amazing. How nice. So I'm so happy to see you all, and also to spend some time with you. So we were all sad and want to learn. Oh, how sweet. So what I would say is, what Pooja asked me to do is to speak a little bit about my journey sort of through life and how I chose to do the things that I'm doing. And I would say, like, I think it's not really us who chooses what we do, but we're sort of guided, right, by like our vasanas and by the circumstances. And so it's been really lucky and a real blessing for the way that things have sort of turned out. And so I'll share a little bit about my story. And with that, I think that, as I've been sort of going through my life, I've been thinking a lot about what is the purpose of our being here. And, we are here for such a short period of time, and how can we make things a little bit easier or a little bit more beautiful for others, we often think, right? And then we realize, oh, we have very little impact actually on others, but really we can purify ourselves and make make everything better for ourselves, really, too, through an attitude of seva. And so that's sort of been what I've been thinking about lately. And so with that, I'll share my screen, not because I have any great things to share, but really just because I have some pictures there that I love. So I'm going to be sharing those. So here is this. Oh, actually, I think I can do this one. Let's see. Yep, here we go. All right. So this is incorporating seva into our careers. But really it's into our life. But also people often ask, like, how do you balance spirituality with your daily life? But really the idea is there's no need to balance it. It is life, right? And so that's what the idea here is with seva also. How interesting. Let's see. Here we go. Okay. So as Pooja was saying, so I was born into Chinmaya Mission. My mom had been chanting for Gurudev. She had first met Gurudev when she was in college, and then she had been chanting for him since she was young. And then I was born in New York, and this is us in New York. I'm the baby being held by my mom, and that's Gurudev in a rare picture in a suit. When he first came to the U.S., he used to wear suits. I don't know if you know that. And so so this is us in New York. And the interesting thing is, so when I went to my first camp when I was 6 weeks old with Gurudev, and when you grow up with Gurudev, he's the kind of person who just takes over your life in the most beautiful way. And so everything you think about is sort of like informed by what you're learning from him. So even though we would only see him every summer, it's still like the messages they filtered in. And learning from Gurudev as a child was really special, because we as Pooja can say, we really got to know, we got to learn from him in many different ways. He wasn't just our teacher, but he was almost like a parental figure, a grandparent figure in some ways too. So he like took care of us so much, and he would like listen to what we had to say and respond to us and play with us so much too. Like he was so loving towards us. So Gurudev passed away when I was 17, and so like we really grew up with him, and it was really like he was like a part of our family. It was really lovely, actually, and so lucky, and just something that made us feel like, oh, Vedanta is your life. It wasn't like something that you just study on Sundays, but really it was your life. And he showed us how to live that. And so because of that, I always sort of thought about, well, how are we living, and are we really like living up to this great legacy that we've been born into then, So then I will say that, after that, I went to college, of course, and then when I was in this 7-year, or actually by the time I was there, it was an 8-year pre-med program called Intaflex, which no longer exists at Michigan. And so I had like an extra year of undergrad because I finished undergrad early. And so in my 4th year of undergrad, I got a master's in public health, and you could do your thesis in anything. And I was like, and at that time, Guruji Swami Tejomayananji I'd just gone to a camp in Houston, and there Guruji talked about cord for the first time. I was 18 years old, and I had heard the word cord, and I was like, this sounds amazing. So I went to Himachal Pradesh at age 19, and I learned from Kshama Didi all about cord. And I would say this really changed the trajectory of my life. I thought, oh my goodness, like here is a pediatrician from Delhi who left her practice and, helped start this whole rural development project, but with this whole idea of sustainable integrated development that like nobody was talking about at that time. And seeing how, they were doing not just medicine, this was the outpatient, the clinic actually, and they weren't just practicing medicine, but they were practicing public health and human rights. I mean, it was like an integrated look at humanity, really. And while doing that, they were also like, studying Vedanta the whole time and practicing it. And we would go up, like climb 2 hours up into the villages, in the mountains, and they would be giving immunizations in the mountains. And I was like, I saw people lining up to get these immunizations, and I was like, this is public health in action. But it was also seeing how medicine affects the individual person, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is what I want to do in my life. And so I became a pediatrician because of Didi. I was like, I want to be a pediatrician. This is amazing. I loved babies, and I loved children, and I loved the interaction of medicine and public health. So I was anyway getting my MPH during undergrad, and so I also, of course, went on to get my medical degree, and but I also became really interested in human rights. And so I went to the Thai-Burma border, and I studied, human rights in displaced populations. During my residency in Washington, D.C., I did a special project on human rights in displaced populations. I spent time in these detention facilities in the outback in South Australia. Of course, like while I was doing that, I was also I would stay in the ashram in Melbourne when I would visit these different places. So it was amazing because I could always be in touch with Vedantic studies while I was visiting all of these places. So it would be like, I met all the Melbourne and Sydney chicks, and I stayed with a chick in Adelaide actually when I drove out to the outback, which was like super scary to be driving on the other side of the road for the first time in your life. But doing that while having attending study group on the side was really something remarkable in an Australian accent. It's really exciting, And so then, I came back and I, I finished residency. I came back and I started my pediatric practice. I was working in a peds-ER, and I did some time in a health department. I was like, I loved the aspect of working with the underserved. And I thought oh, this is really important. I also got more involved with human rights work. I also got married. I had, children and nieces and nephews and, a family. So that was also happening on the side. But I got more involved with human rights work also, did a lot of advocacy at the border where we were working with, the Trump zero tolerance policies were difficult. And so we would go and advocate at the Mexican border. There was a lot of, work that we started doing with media, with the Washington Post and New York Times, trying to get people to understand the urgency of human rights. And then it sort of all culminated where I the Biden administration opened up these 14 emergency intake sites across the country to deal with the large influx of unaccompanied minors coming across the border. And so they asked me to, and I went and got hired by one of these sites, which happened to be in Michigan. And it was so wild to me that, you know, we were working here with children who were unaccompanied, like they didn't have parents. And this was a tender age facility with children from age 5 to 17. And yet, like, you know, for the first half of the year, we had children from the Mexican border. The second half of the year, we had children from Afghanistan. And I was like, you know, with all of this, I realized how much Vedanta kind of helps us, because with all of that, it was such traumatizing work. I mean, we were suffering from secondary trauma. We'd see children with bullet wounds from the Taliban. We'd see children who had walked 1,500 miles to get to us and sort of had no hope for the future. And like, you know, you're sitting there and you think like, you know, what is sort of our purpose here? What are we doing here, really? And the whole time I was like, this is highly traumatic, and yet, you know, we have to think like, rise above this and understand, you know, where are we going with this? What is the purpose, you know? And then as I was sort of like sorting through all of this, I was still working in the ER, in the peds ER, and, you know, with the large, like all of this COVID was going on and all these children were being affected. There was all this stuff happening. And I thought, I need to do work that is nourishing and uplifting. This was like getting really draining, actually, to be honest with you. And at that time, Pujya Swami Swarupanandaji came to me and asked if I would join the Cord USA board and help oversee global projects for Cord. And I thought, oh my gosh, it's like you ask a question and the answer just kind of comes to you right there. And I remember when I was 19, 20 years old, and I went to Cord for the first time. I'd been there a few times in the interim also, but the first time that I'd gone to Siddhabardi, I thought, this is exactly what I want to do. Like, I want to do this when I grow up. And then here I am, like, 25, 26, 27 years later, like, and I get to do this. I mean, it's like incredible when the way that life kind of works out. And so then, I think back a lot to when I was at that site in Albion, the Biden administration site. There was this child that I saw, and she had taken a bus. So she had walked 1,500 miles from Guatemala to the border. She had swam across the Rio Grande River, gotten caught by border security, and then been put on a bus to our site. So like another, say, 1,500 miles or so on this bus. And she drew this for me. And I asked her, like, oh, what is this that you've drawn here? And she said, oh, it's my favorite scene that I saw out of the bus. And I was like, oh, the apples in the tree, and she's like, no. And I was like, oh, the house, the mountains. And she looked at me like I had two heads. She's like, look a little closer. And so she showed this, and she's like, look at the truck driver. And she said, es una mujer, it's a woman, She said, in America, I can be anything I want to be. And I thought, like, oh, this is the answer, It lies in the hope that we have for ourselves, And so, like, that is the beauty of what our purpose is. It's the hope that we have for ourselves. And I think, like, this story really, like, exemplifies kind of what is our purpose here. And so then when Swamiji asked me to, join Cord USA, then I went back to Siddhabardi again and learned from Kshama Didi. I started learning from the women in the fields, what the real vision of Cord is, which actually gives people a sense of agency. And this idea that, like, when a woman with a 5th grade education can, like, hold a sit-in and then, like, teach herself how to read and then hold a sit-in and say, like, hey, it's not fair that my village doesn't get any drinking water. And so, I'm going to organize a sit-in with 60 women from my village so that then my village can have drinking water so people can have access to safe drinking water, then this feels like it brings in like all of the aspects of my life. It brings in, the human rights aspect. It brings in the public health, it brings in, pediatrics and medicine, but also it really brings in Vedanta and this idea that, we all have this divinity in us, and we have the right to advocate for ourselves, and we have the right to advocate for each other, and we have to see that divinity in each of us. And so that is why we should engage in seva at every level. And it doesn't have to be that you have to be a doctor, or you have to be in some kind of healthcare field or any particular field in order to be able to do seva. But really, the idea is whatever you do, if you have an attitude of seva, then the work becomes beautiful. So now, with Cord, we are now starting this, bringing this vision, this 4-pillar vision of Cord, all across to all 300 centers across the world. We're starting really small. We've just got a few going so far, but it's really exciting to see it in action here in our own backyards. And it feels like it's so fulfilling for us. And so I love this quote by Rabindranath Tagore that says, "I slept and dreamt that life was joy. I awoke and saw that life was service. I acted and behold, service was joy." And so I think about our inspiration with Gurudev and Pujya Swamiji and Pujya Guruji and Kshama Didi and all of the people in our own mission, and then finally with ourselves, and how we can then bring this vision to our own life. That's all that I've got. Thanks.
Wonderful. I really, really beautiful way that you shared your life story. So inspiring. I love that, the thought that you just shared about seeing divinity in others, and that is what inspires you to advocate for others. It was really very insightful. Thank you, Vidyaji. We're actually going to do a little bit of discussion now, just to reflect ourselves a little bit on how do we bring Seva, that spirit of Seva, into our own lives. One, just what does Seva mean to you? Just kind of reflecting back to the basics of what does Seva mean? And then two, how do you bring an attitude of Seva to your everyday work? We'll get into groups of 4, and we'll put the question in the chat. Hariom, everyone, welcome back. We're doing well on time, so we're gonna do a little bit of Q&A.
Great questions. I mean, even like in our breakout room, we were just having this discussion. I really think this whole idea of how do you think about Seva? Is it something that you just sort of think about internally? Is it something that you have to sort of seek out in your career? Like, do you seek out opportunities to find ways to help people, right? Or is it more something like an attitude that's internal? Yeah. And I would say it turns out that in my experience, so what Kshama Didi always says is charity is we have a lot of stuff and then we just give that to somebody who doesn't have so much. And it tends to be kind of paternalistic, whereas Seva is a lot more back and forth. It's a sharing attitude. It's like this attitude that we live in this earth as an ecosystem, as part of a larger ecosystem. Mother Earth gives us so much. The people around us, our parents, our grandparents, our teachers, our coworkers, our friends, our children, everybody around us gives us so much. And so it's our responsibility to give back wherever we can see fit. And so if you're a computer programmer, by helping, create a code that nobody had thought of, that is Seva, it's you're making the world easier and better and more beautiful in so many different ways. And so it's and then having that attitude of like, I'm doing it for God, I'm doing it because I see the divinity in others, and not because I want everybody to come and thank me and give me an award for that, like how come they got an award and I didn't, but really it's like, I'm doing it because I see the divinity in others. Then that's the attitude of Seva, and it automatically kind of then comes, I would say. Oh, this is such a great question. So I have a good friend who's a lawyer who jokes that you can't find a nice lawyer, and I tease them because I always say like that's not true at all, because lawyers are actually some of the most, I've learned that lawyers are some of the kindest and sort of the people who like uphold the law are really the best people, really, because there are probably a bunch of lawyers on here, and now I'm in trouble, right? So like, these are the people who like, yeah, great. Well, I'll tell you, like in medicine, we're like scared of lawyers, but then what I've learned is like they uphold human rights, right? And so when you look then, oh, is that right? Oh, that's right. Yeah, I knew that. I forgot. So when you look then at, at the corporate world, and how Guruji always says, the corporate world is famous for the rat race, but the thing about a rat race is even if you win, you're still a rat in the end. so I would say that like, we have to kind of like change maybe our attitude towards it. So like even in the corporate world, there's still like, the idea behind the company we're in is like, it's there for benefiting people, right? And the work we're doing is like, we can look at like, okay, well, I'm doing this not for myself, not for personal gain, perhaps, but you can think about each small thing that you do. I want to do this in a way that's beautiful. I want to make sure that the work is beautiful, and I want to make sure that, I do it without worry about the result. It's like karma yoga, right? And so then when we have that kind of an attitude, then it purifies us. That's one thing. And then I would say that having Seva does find you. I would say like it's kind of like when if you become known as a person who is a collector of cards, then people will like keep giving you cards. Same way, like if you are a person who likes to do different kinds of Seva projects, like Seva finds you. It does. Whatever you like, it gravitates towards you, I would say. Yeah. So actually what I'll do is I will just put in here. So this is our website, chordglobal.org. You can get to it through the Chord USA website also. It's under like global projects or something like that, programs, and then global network or something like that. So what we do is we have this whole global network. We now have something like 20 sites or something in the US that are starting programs locally. The whole idea is to bring this 4-pillar vision of Chord here to our own backyards. So many of us keep going to Siddhabardi or going to Shirvani or different places in India and volunteering, which needs to continue. The work, raising funds for Chord in India needs to continue. But we can also be bringing that vision of Chord right here in our own backyard. There's great racial injustice, great inequity, great poverty, domestic violence, so much need right here in our own backyards. And so we can be bringing our talents and expertise right here to our own backyard. And when we do that, when we understand how to help people develop this sense of agency, then communities change, people thrive, and the whole fabric of the community changes. And so what Swamiji's vision is that by having people develop and drive their own programs here in their own communities, then the impact of Chinmaya Mission will be felt locally wherever we are. And so we now have these about 20 sites or so that are starting to look at programs here. I would say about 5 of them have actually gotten their feet wet and are really doing work already on the ground. And now we're starting a program in Uganda, and Kenya. So we're really, truly global. We have a set of global advisors, folks in Australia and Singapore and Kuala Lumpur and Mumbai, who are kind of overseeing our projects to make sure that there is, global scalability. And so it's really exciting, and it's interesting, and it's truly, something that's nourishing and uplifting, as we were looking for. So I would say, if you're interested, you can always text me or email me. I'll put my email in here, and then here's my cell number. You can always text me also, but I'm on the East Coast time zone, so if I'm sleeping, I'm sorry, but otherwise I'll write back.
There was one follow-up. How do we know
if your center? Yeah, so if your center is in the cord, so there's under the links, I think it says which centers have a cord representative, and you can also just text me, and then I can get you in touch with your cord representative too for that center, and then and that way, I can tell you what stage that if your center is in a particular stage, and where they're at. So yeah. So that's that.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Vidya. We really, really appreciate you.
That was really fun, Pooja. Thanks a lot.
Story.
Hariom, everyone. Have a joyous holiday.